Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in just 5 months, Secretary Rubio, and it's wonderful to have you back here in the committee. In just 5 months since you've been there, along with President Trump, I just want to take a moment to highlight the incredible work that this administration has accomplished with your leadership and clearly President Trump's, restored U.S. leadership across the globe, unleashed American energy, secured our southern border, reduced illegal immigration by 95%, reimposed maximal deterrence on Iran, pushed back on Chinese aggression, created new deals for U.S. companies, secured the release of hostages and unjustly detained Americans. I really appreciate the strong leadership. And according to Monday, Mr. Secretary, and you see the wonderful picture of you in today's Washington Post, you and your bride Jeanette meeting with the Pope. If you take a look up here, Marco, you're going to see this great picture of you. And yeah. Want to comment on that at all? What it was, I've done all these things, and you got to meet the Pope. A new Pope, an American.
Well, I told people yesterday I started the morning meeting with the Pope, and I ended the evening at an event, a Kennedy Center event at the White House with the U.S. President, and they were both Americans.
Amazing times. I want to talk about Iran, if we could. So in the first 100 days, the maximum pressure campaign against Iran came into full force once again. The administration sanctioned 72 entities, 14 individuals, 74 vessels, as well as 18 additional entities, including 2 Chinese-based oil terminals, 13 vessels. I think the maximum pressure campaign is working. We're already seeing a reduction in Iran's ability to fund destabilizing operations across the region. How does the administration plan to maintain this momentum and then continue with the talks that are going on?
Well, I think it's clear for the Iranians. I mean, we're going to continue with sanctions until there's a deal otherwise. And by the way, there's also another set of sanctions out there that involve things like the sponsorship of terrorism and things of that they're doing. But when it comes to the nuclear program, until there's a deal, there's going to be sanctions. That's just the way it works. And so that's the president has issued an executive order for maximum pressure, and that's being executed on every single day. None of these are being slowed down while we're engaged in these talks. Ultimately, if we are able to reach a deal, then obviously that could be a part of it, but we're not at that stage yet. So look, we hope that there can be something done. These will not be easy. And by the way, one additional note on it is there's a separate set of sanctions out there, which are the snapback provisions that the E3 in Europe have. That's on another clock, completely different from ours. And I want to be clear about that. What they decide to do with their sanctions. Now, maybe we'll do a deal with Iran and they'll be satisfied with it and not impose their sanctions. But I met with the E3 again. What day is it today? Tuesday? I met with them maybe 4 days ago in Turkey. And they are moving forward on their process, independent from ours, that could impose additional sanctions as early as July, August, September, October, November, September, October of this year.
I want to move to one of Iran's in the neighborhood neighbors with Syria. And President Trump met with the new Syrian president. He's urged the leader to deport foreign terrorists from Syria, help the U.S. counter ISIS. I want to just talk about ISIS, if I can, and the concern for the resurgence of ISIS. It's been a significant concern. About 2,500 active ISIS fighters operating in Syria and in Iraq. Estimated 10,000 ISIS fighters in prisons in Syria. And what's your assessment of the threat posed in ISIS? And I know we have a presence. I was visiting our Wyoming troops who are in eastern Syria, and I want to know how that's helped to address the threats.
Yeah, so there's 2 major threats facing the Transitional Authority in Syria. The first is a resurgence of ISIS, many of them foreign fighters, most of them foreign fighters, and that's a very significant element because any space that's ungoverned, if there are parts of the country where the Transitional Authority does not control it, it creates an ungoverned space that ISIS can come in. So that's the first threat. The other is Iran. Iran has not given up its efforts to gin up former Assad officials and others to get behind certain armed groups on the ground and stir up trouble as well in the country. So these are both threats. They're different, but they're related, and they pose 2 of the most serious threats to the Transitional Authority's efforts to create a nation state in in Syria that does not threaten Israel, does not threaten its neighbors, and is able to provide the life that the people of Syria want to rebuild for themselves, including many who are abroad, who have expressed a willingness or an interest in returning. And in fact, we've seen some of those people begin to return just because of the U.S. sanctions announcement. But we want that trend to continue because Syria will need them in order to rebuild their country and reclaim it.
Can I talk to you about Gaza? President Trump's laid out a plan for Gaza. You recently said, "We support a future for the people of Gaza that is free of Hamas and full of opportunity." How do you envision a transition to a non-Hamas security and governance in Gaza?
Well, that's a central question and not an easy one to solve, obviously. We've engaged with partners. There was an Egyptian-led effort for a while. There's a Saudi effort now. We've obviously engaged with our regional partners to come up with the constructs of what that looks like. Not, to be frank, I mean, in the midst of the conflict ongoing, most of the attention has been paid to the humanitarian situation and the freeing of the hostages and multiple failed efforts at a ceasefire, which are ongoing and continue, and the hopes of ending this and the cessation of hostilities at some point. But thought has been given to it. But I think at the core of it is, I think we can find the funds to do it. I think you can find the partners to do it. I think the central question for the future of Gaza is going to be who governs it. Because as long as there's a group like Hamas there, it's going to be very difficult to envision long-term peace and prosperity. So whether it's Hamas or some successor organization that spins out of it, that has to be a factor that you eliminate. And one of the ways you prevent it is by having a governing authority on the ground in Gaza that can provide the security necessary to allow there to be the peace necessary so you can have the prosperity we hope for.
I want to talk, last question, in terms of American energy. Last year, the Biden administration chose to pause approvals of pending LNG exports. We know that Europe needs those. It created a lot of uncertainty. President Trump has promised in his unleashing American energy, he's removed a lot of the obstacles. Our LNG exports have surged. I think it's going to help in Europe. European countries have increased their purchases of U.S. LNG. How has lifting this pause that Biden put on here restored confidence in America as a reliable partner to Europe?
Well, obviously, I was just commenting a moment ago, I believe on Saturday, the first LNG shipment reached Italy. And there are other countries that are building terminals to receive it as well. So the fact that the United States joins now in the world as a reliable long-term source of liquefied natural gas as an export, I think improves our ties and our partnerships around the world. And it's a need for us because we have the capacity to export it and to develop it, and it's a need for our allies who need to diversify and in some cases make less dependent their system of generating electricity. It's a fundamental problem for multiple countries, for example, in Europe. It's not just the energy they need now, it's the energy they're going to need in the years to come. If you do an audit of where they're going to wind up needing, they don't have any way to generate that now unless they rely on things like U.S. exports of LNG. And that alone even won't be enough. They're going to have to find some other resources as well.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.